and your size. And some of these children are going to be older than you are. Because I told you they went to school until they're 22.
Right.
He said, now, if you get the job, if he approves of you, I will give you an opportunity. If you will promise me that you will try to do everything to the best of your ability, and also don't do things like, he didn't want me to play out like I used to skate. That's what one of the things he used to see me skating. I used to love roller skating, but didn't have a rink, man.
Right.
I'd roll on the streets. I love skating. We skate all over Newport News, riding bicycles and skating and playing ball.
Right.
We were tomboyish kind of girls. So anyway, I said, well, I'll do everything. I'll try to do everything you want me to do. So he hired another young girl. She was 20, and I was 19. So he said, I'm going to tell you something now. You're taking a chance on both of you. Both of you are Hampton graduates. I don't know how this is going to work out. We're going to try it. And when I got there and those teachers found out that I was going to teach, the word had already gotten around Newport News. They made up their mind that they had already been my teachers. Therefore, they were going to make my job. They're going to help me keep that job. And you know what they would do? Come and sit in my room at different times. They would just come on in and sit and just have a seat to see what was going on. And if anything was going on that they didn't like, kids were talking back to me or anything, nobody talked back to me. But if anybody had been, they would have given them a fit.
Really? Mm-hmm.
Yes, sir, because they were determined that I was going to keep that job. And because this is the first time this had ever been done.
Right.
And
so you actually had a village that was already taking care of you.
I had my village already made. My village from Hattie Lucas to that was in the Hattie Lucas and Miss Dawkins, and a lady named Miss Carter, Artemisia Carter, looked like a white woman. They had this whole home economics department straight, but Hattie was a young person herself. She wasn't that. She was about 10 years older than I. But anyway, then the math teachers, all the math teachers had taught me from algebra, from the basic general math all the way through. The next one was the science teachers that taught me all the science class. And let me tell you what they did when I was at Huntington. We had cooperative learning, where the math teacher and your science teacher were the same person. Your English teacher and your social studies teacher were the same person. So you stayed in classes 2 hours. You had a break between classes, but like you would if you were changing classes. But you came right back to the same teacher.
Right. Now, who was your English teacher?
My English teacher. I started with Miss Frazier. You didn't know Miss Frazier. She was all of them were Presbyterians, all.
Oh, really? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Mr. Calloway, they were elegant. Then during those days, your teachers were, a black person couldn't do but so many things. You could be a doctor, lawyer, or a teacher. What's the other profession?
Preacher.
Doctor, lawyer, preacher. That's right. Those 4 professions. That's what you could do. That's all that a professional person could possibly do in the black race. So these men who had engineering ability and all that stuff, they couldn't teach. I mean, they couldn't go out and work in the shipyard and engineering jobs and things like that. You know what they did? They had to work as teachers. Some of them carried mail. Can you believe that a man with a degree from college had to carry mail?
Wow. Mm-hmm.
Or working as an orderly in the hospital. They had all these off the wall jobs because they wouldn't allow black men to have those jobs.
Right. Mm-hmm.
You didn't know that, did you? I wish I could write. I should do it. Jay told me, said, Mom, you should write your experiences because you could really put it into words properly. And I was glad you were able to ask me some questions because that is showing me that people really need to know how bad it was. See, all people. Did you see where this teacher asked the children these black children and whites,
how to be a slave?
Yeah, how to be and draw a picture of themselves.
Right.
Why would she do that? I want to know. I would like to get in her mind and find out. Because when we went to Warwick in 1971 to integrate that school, they gave us no training before. We had 2 weeks before the government said, you're going to integrate schools. You may as well go in and make that decision. Where they waited all summer thinking they were going to win the case and not have to integrate. And Phoenix, Huntington, and Carver had not been started yet. But anyway, You see what the problem was? They were going to not integrate. And so they decided that in order for us to not integrate, let's hold it out. So when school starts, the children will have to go somewhere, and they have to go back to their old segregated schools. I wish we had, but anyway, that's another story. Do you know that 2 weeks before school was to open, they integrated the schools? Can you believe that? And we teachers were given a notice. A letter came in our mail that said, you've been assigned to, and I was assigned to Warwick High School. Go to your classroom, and anything that you want to keep and use at the new school, box it, put your name on it, and route it to the school that you want, and put it outside your door. Now, that has to be done by, and they gave us a Monday morning, but we had to have it done by, because the trucks were going to go by and start hauling things from the different schools.
And y'all just had 2 weeks to do this?
2 weeks. That's all we had, 2 weeks. And they didn't have time to train us, because in most of the cities where they did this, they had training sessions over the summer, so that the teachers who were going to be teaching white children and black children, they would have a chance to get adjusted and get some techniques, you know. Because, look, people didn't know what to do with integration. They really didn't know. We had to hit and miss with it. That's why I don't understand why those children that I got in my classes at Warwick High School, I love every one of them, why they love me so. Because I had no skills for integration. I knew English. I could teach English. I could teach composition, literature, whatever, speech. I had all that preparation at Hampton University, but I had no preparation for integration. And that's why Mr. Orednick said to me in the first meeting, I told you about my first meeting,
right?
But anyway, and how I got the job. Mr. Calloway, who lived across from the Phyllis Suite, the YWCA on Orchid Avenue, he was my teacher, English teacher, and he was retiring. And he had been at Huntington all those years. He had finished Howard University and look, he was fabulous. He was like a college, all of our teachers were like college professors. You know, they were just so well trained, and they dressed so professionally, and everything was just so different in those days, the way teachers acted and the way they behaved. But anyway.
Well, what's interesting is that I never even knew there were any male English teachers.
You didn't? Not at Warwick. Not at Warwick.
Not at Warwick, not at Huntington either.
Warwick had male, because I had 2 males my first year there. But
male English teachers?
They didn't have. See, they didn't have women teachers. See, what you didn't know is that women teachers weren't hired. They had lots of men teachers. Most of your English teachers were men. Almost all your teachers were men in the high school.
Okay.
And they didn't want women to teach. And they had made it hard. If you got married, you had to leave teaching. It was hired just single women. I mean, it was awful because it kept you almost like in a kind of slave mentality after you had earned your degree. They did up until a certain point when black people wouldn't take that anymore. Black kids wouldn't take it anymore. But my generation would take it. See, I learned which behinds to kiss and which behinds to kick. I learned that. See, but the Jay and her group, when they came along, they didn't know what I knew. And I told my granddaughter, I said, you'll never keep a job until you learn a basic principle, which behinds to kiss and which behinds to kick, and when to do it. You have to know who's and when.
Right.
My husband went down to Atlanta to work, and a old black man told him that, said, Ted, if you're going to run a business, a bank down here, you're going to have to work with white people, old white people who love to think that black people see them as the father of the world, and you're supposed to do what they say do. And so you learn how to go in there and say, yes, sir, no, sir, take your hat off when you go in their offices to see them, trying to, get them to invest in something.
Right.
You go in there. TD went down to Atlanta and cleaned up because he went with that attitude. I know which behinds to kiss and which behinds to kick. I told you, Mr. Scales gave me a hard time.
Right, you did. Right.
AP.
But the thing is, when you was at the Institute, and when you was at Hampton, were you thinking about becoming a teacher, or what were your plans
I
before?
was going to be a teacher. My plan was to be a journalist. I wanted to be a journalist. But somebody told me, get yourself a teaching certificate because a black person is going to have a hard time finding a job because you got the journaling guide. You can go out to Chicago and try to get a job with the Chicago Defender. But think of all those kids who finished the University of Chicago and all those big schools who already tried to get those jobs. So the thing in New York, up in New York, said and there were 2 or 3 newspapers in Harlem. Said now if you're going to get those jobs, they're going to be hard to get because everybody else who wanted to go major in journalism will have those jobs. And look, at my age, look, what would I have done at 19 years old trying to compete with somebody who had 4 or 5 years experience in journalism? But I wanted to be a journalist. My first desire was to be a PE teacher. That's what I wanted to be when I left Huntington. And I was on my way from the meeting of all freshmen at Ogden Hall to the gym because we used to have to. We didn't register the way we do now online. You registered by
inline.
You got inline, and not only that, you remember? No, you wouldn't. You were too young. But when you went to Tech,
we had to get in line. We had to do online. It wasn't online.
You had lines. You still had lines.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And then the professor, you could walk up to the desk and wanted to register for, let's say, English at 7:45 in the morning, 3 classes a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And that's what you want. You make it out your schedule now. And you can wait in that line and go up there. And if it's full, you had to pick another class. But if it wasn't full, he would tell you, yes, you can get in that class.
Right.
And then you'd be registered for that class, and you got a sheet telling you about your books and blah, blah, blah. Well, I had made up my mind on the way from walking down there with a girl named, she died. She just died, Evelyn Sandbrook. She just died last year, was married, and at the time Mary died. Anyway, Evelyn and I were walking down there. She's very smart. She went to Phoenix, but we played softball together out there at Huntington High School. All the kids from Aberdeen made a team, and we made a team in downtown Newport News, the girls. So we would play softball. So that's how she knew me. So on the way out of Ogden Hall, she and I were walking toward the gym, and I asked her what was she going to major in. She said elementary education. I said, well, she said, well, what are you going to do, Pat? I said, I want to be a journalist. She said, yeah. I said, but I know that I've been told that that's going to be hard for black people. A black young lady, a man may get the job, but a black girl will have a hard time getting a job. Why don't you, you see how these girls do now on TV, the weather and all that?
Right.
We didn't even have TV. When I went to high school, we didn't have TV. So how could I get a job as a weather girl or anything like that? I couldn't even start at that level. So I was wise to give up journalism as my first love. I said, I'm going to teach PE. She said, Pat, let me tell you something. I love you, but I can't imagine you're not thinking this thing through. Dude, by the time if you're going to stay in teaching enough to go up to be, at that time, you could teach till you were 75 years old if you wanted to. And so she said, you're going to be older. After you get 40, you start getting older. And you know that because we had psychology. And she said, can you see yourself getting up in the morning and having all these pains and arthritis and blah, 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 and then have to go into that gym and demonstrate for those kids what you want them to do. Pulling up ropes and doing calisthenics and all that stuff, running around those tracks. She said, can you see that yourself doing that? Now, I'm on my way to the gym to register to become now to a PE teacher.
Right.
And she said, what else do you like? I said, well, I love English. I said, because I loved all my English classes, and I did very well in all of that. She said, well, I'll tell you what you do. You get yourself a major in English and a minor in social studies with a double minor in PE, and be prepared to do PE. Get a double minor. Lord have mercy, I was so glad that she had made me do that. I mean, she didn't make me.
Right.
She talked me in. That was on my way to register. And I made up my mind that morning to become an English teacher. Well, when I got back out of there, and I told my English teachers that I would see, I said, I majored in English. I said, they said, oh, that's wonderful because you were such a good English student. Blah, blah, blah. So everybody, validated that for me. So I was ready now to feel that I had people behind me. Well, I had no idea that I was going to end up at my alma mater. I thought I'd be up in the country. That's how you started.
Right.
You started teaching in those days. You took whatever they gave you, and usually you had to go live with a family. They wouldn't let a single person live in an apartment. They didn't. You couldn't rent an apartment by yourself. You had to rent an apartment with a family. You get it?
Right.
A room with a family. Just like I come and get a rental room from Naomi.
Right. Mm-hmm.
You know, I need right, or Audrey, or you.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But I had to rent with a married couple, and it had to be a reputable person in the community. And I'd be out in the country somewhere. Then I had to find some kind of way to get to the work. Either buy a car right away, which I didn't have the money to do, and people wouldn't lend black people money then, Chester.
Right.
They wouldn't lend would buy a car or buy a house or whatever. So I ended up doing the right thing. But here's the thing that made me so fortunate. And I knew when Mr. Scales died, his wife called me and she said to me, Pat, Scales wanted me to tell you that if anything happened to him before you, that you were to do his funeral. I said, what do you mean do his funeral? Because she knew I wasn't a preacher.
Right.
And I had left the Presbyterian church then as a little girl and gone and joined the Baptist church. Because see, we were all, my mother and all of us were Presbyterians. When my mother left the Presbyterian church, Mary and I were still little girls. Brother and Ethel were older, so therefore they could go where they wanted to go. But Mary and I had to go with our mother. And so that's how I became a Baptist.
Right. Mm-hmm.
See, I was also Episcopalian because my grandparents took us to church with them, and my grandparents were Episcopalian. So you see how messed up we were, and
right.
My daddy was an Episcopalian. So we could have ended up being all of us Episcopalian. Mary left the Presbyterian church and went to the Baptist church, but left the Baptist church and went back to the Episcopal church.
Okay.
So our background is Episcopalian first, then Baptist, then Presbyterian, then Baptist.
Right. Mm-hmm.
That's what Mary and I. Brother and Mary Ethel stayed kind of stuck, but they didn't ever go back to the Episcopal church where my grandparents wanted us to go. They didn't ever go back there. They went on to because one thing, the Episcopalians were very few blacks, and then there weren't that many. There wasn't but one church.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And you didn't have church but once a month because the priest had to come through from 2 or 3 other churches to be, about those
right.
co-pastors.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But anyway, Miss Scales was sitting there at the luncheon table. She said, you admired that girl so much you ought to let her. But anyway, she said, Pat, he wants you to do. I said, look, he has 2 children who are college graduates, Davida and Drury, his son. I said, one, he's a dentist now. By the way, he's dying. He has incurable cancer, too.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, and this, and Davida, who is his daughter. Have you ever seen Davida? She comes to your church.
Oh, yeah, I think I've seen her, right. Mm-hmm.
Wears those big hats.
Right, uh-huh.
Yeah. Okay, well, anyway, she said, Pat, Scales did not want Davida to do it, didn't want Julia to do it. He wanted you to do his funeral. I said, wait a minute. After all those years I worked for him, I didn't know he had that much respect for me. She said he had more respect than he did for most of the teachers in that school. I said, well, I'm very, very flattered that he, especially professionally, English-wise.
Right.
Because you would do it right. And I had to put on hold my life to get his funeral going. And so I said, that's a great honor for a principal who that you worked for all those years to have that kind of respect for you. But anyway, Mr. Hines got the job for me at Warwick. I had been assigned to Warwick, and he called the lady who was in charge of employment for the city of Newport News Schools and said, Giederman, I've got a young lady who was going to be my department head next year because Mr. Calloway is retiring, and I was going to hire her. I'd already signed it. It had already been signed. The contract had already been signed. She said, why don't you let her go up to Warwick and interview, since that's where she's going to be assigned. Because I heard that the lady at Warwick, the white lady at Warwick, is retiring. She's retiring. So that's a double retirement, you see. So she said, well, I'll tell you what. I will let her go and be interviewed with the understanding that if the principal doesn't want her because he knows what the conflicts and things may be, hiring a black person to be over 25 white people, that you just didn't do that.
Right. And young too. Mm-hmm.
And young, and no, I wasn't that young anymore. Remember, I'd already been at Huntington 20 years.
Oh, okay, uh-huh.
Okay, I see. Integration. I went into Huntington when we were still segregated, and I stayed there all those segregated years. That's why the children are so close to me. The black kids are so close to me, because I stayed there through all those years, and they were all black. All my students were black. Some of the teachers, look, they integrated the teachers first before they integrated the students.
Right.
So some of our about 5 of our teachers were white in the end, but Warwick had about 5 black teachers. You know, Miss Jordan and all of them, they were already at Warwick. Jordan and Miss Page. Did Miss Page teach you?
No, she didn't. Yes, she did. Yes, she did. Miss Page, biology.
Miss Page, yeah, all of them, They were all, they were already there. There were 5 of them already there. So it's like they would put them in the schools to I think they were getting ready so in case we did have, no, you know what they did that for? They tried to fool the government that they were integrated.
By having black teachers.
By having that's right, by having black teachers in white schools and white schools teachers in black schools. And one lady lived down here, her name was Mrs. Babb. She lived right in the corner of Shore Drive, you know, where Senator Price lived.
Right, uh-huh.
Next door was Butts. Well, right across from Butts was this white lady named Miss Babb, and she was very smart. Children were smart and everything. And Miss Babb was transferred to Huntington, and she was right. She said, Pat, one of the greatest things that ever happened to me was being transferred into a school where the teachers were black. I said, well, you stayed right there in your house. She was one of the last people. In fact, she died out of there. She died off Shore Drive. She wouldn't move. See, some of the white people wouldn't move from down here.
Right.
But anyway, getting back to my situation, Mr. Starboard he wasn't a doctor then. Mr. Starboard was the principal, and he took me up there, and I went through the interview process with him, and he took me all over and showed me there. Oh, Lord, I was just flabbergasted when I saw how many things. See, we didn't integrate so much. We wouldn't have integrated if it was just for mixing the races. We integrated because they had better schools, they had better materials. They didn't even have a business department at Huntington High School. Not a typing class anywhere. Mrs. Ratley, that's why the people in this town love Miss Ratley so much. She came over there and she said, there's going to be a business department at this school. And we're going to have typewriters and blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. And that's who started the first business department in a black school in Newport News, Miss Jessie Ratley. That's why but she wasn't a Ratley then. She was a Jessie Menifil.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because she came out of Alabama. See, there's something about Alabama. Do you know anybody from Alabama?
I do, I do.
They are different from any people anywhere. Only one that made me sick is Charles Barkley. Just as crazy as he can be. He said, I like Trump, so and so and so. I don't know whether he's playing a game or not, but
right.
Whatever it is, it's very ignorant. He's very ignorant. But everybody else is black that has been through this town that was from Alabama. They were progressive, like Miss Madam Daniels. People like that.
Right.
Ignorant talking. They talk like they didn't know what they're talking about. They knew how to play the game, too. But they were just as smart and not afraid of anybody. I've never seen people like that before. And I asked them, what happened in Alabama that made black people not afraid to boycott, not afraid to walk those streets that they had to walk? Have you ever seen it? Everything came out of Alabama.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But just the story has not been told about what. And see, I don't know the whole story because remember, I was a little child and didn't even know that we had a racial problem in America.
Right.
My daddy looked like a white man.
Right.
I didn't know that whites and blacks didn't marry each other and didn't have children together. I didn't know any of that.
Right.
Because I was looking at a daddy who looked like a white. He took off his clothes. He was in his face before he took off his clothes. He looked like a white man.
Right.
When he took off his clothes, he was surely white. but he was, that man was just like, if you saw my daddy, your first designation would have been, he's a white man. That's what your first designation would have been. Mr. Scales looked like a white man. Did you ever see him?
I did. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he looked just like a white man. His daughter looks like a Italian or Greek or something. She doesn't look black. Davita doesn't. The one who goes to your church. I mean, not your church, but the Presbyterian church.
Right.
But it's a big story. Sometimes when you want to ask me some questions about things that you know, see, but here's the problem. You don't even know how different things were, so you don't know what questions to ask. You know what happened with our books? They would give us every year, every 6 years in Newport News, they change books. We start a committee on the 5th year evaluating books, and on the 6th year we make decisions on new books every 6 years. Then the books have become obsolete. That's how quickly textbooks have to be added to, because to get new information is discovered and so forth. So, and then they change it because of children get the answers to everything. Like in math, you know how the answers are already there. Your mama has a book at home, got all the answers. So anyway, they change books every 6 years. They would give us the old books and wouldn't even have the decency to try to get the name tags out of the backs of the book. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm talking about?
Right.
So you can see that they'd already been issued 6 years. I mean, they had already been issued 5 years. They would not, to children. So they would give them to us and then give them the white children new books. Well, the state of Virginia had to stop doing that all over the state in Newport News. You had to give white children and black children new books at the same time. So those are the things that made integration necessary. All right, the next thing that made it necessary, our buildings were not air-conditioned. Our buildings weren't comfortable in this winter as far as warmth was concerned. We had breakdowns and didn't have gyms with good running water and things for the children to shower after gym and so forth. Everything. We didn't even have an auditorium at Huntington. We used the Shipyard Community Center, which was at the corner of 35th Street and Orchid Avenue. Now, did you ever see that building?
I don't remember. I don't recall.
I know it. You can't recall it. That's where I met Jackie Robinson. I said, your generation doesn't even know that Jackie Robinson, the year that they hired him, his manager, Branch Rickey, a white man, took him all over the South, wherever anybody would invite him, and introduced him to the children and the people in that town. And Newport News was big time because of the shipyard, and they brought him here. And when I saw Jackie Robinson at Columbia University, I was standing right beside him. He came in and ordered some coffee at a chock full of nuts. And I said, I can't talk. And I almost fainted. I almost passed out. And I said, I can't even ask him a question. But I wanted to tell him that as a little girl, he came to Newport News when I was a little girl and gave us a lecture and talked all about his experiences. I mean, can you imagine me getting his autograph and standing there talking to him as a child?
Right. Mm-hmm.
And looking up and saying, here's a black man, the first black man ever to play white professional baseball. I mean, those were experiences that Newport News children had. Now, Hale Thompson, whom they're honoring now with this thing on the wall over there on 25th Street. Have you seen it yet?
No, I haven't seen it. I saw it in the newspaper. Right.
Newspaper, yes. Well, anyway, I'm going to go and take a picture of it because I took one of Al Fitzgerald. But I'm going to take a picture of it because Hale Thompson was one of those who started what they call the Junior NAACP, and they went around and got people to let their children be what do you call that when you have a suit, class action suit.
Right.
You have to have a group of people as your people who are protesting, and they had us as the children because we had no library. We couldn't use the public library, and that's why Hale became so outstanding to this community. He was already an outstanding lawyer, but he became outstanding. A lawyer Newsom protege. He was a protege on lawyer Newsom, and he had the NAACP had them integrate. And they said the other day that we could all use all same libraries, but they put us in the Dora Miller. Now you know the Dora Miller Recreation Center that's on Wickham Avenue. That was a white one. That was called World War II Memorial Building. Our building was at 31st Street, where President Dr. Scott's building is. You know where Dr. Scott?
Right. Mm-hmm.
That was the black children's building, and we had that black swimming pool right there at the corner of 31st Street, where the auditorium is. That was the black swimming pool. 29th Street, on 29th Street, 28th Street was the white swimming pool and the white building. Both the buildings are still there, but they have different names now. So the one that's now called Doris Miller memorial building for white children. See how close we were together?
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
But anyway, this city has some praying to do. We need, and you know what? We're getting ready to mess it up.